Hi all, let's look at another interesting game from the Sinquefield Cup today. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave against Wesley So. So this is in the first round. E4 from MVL for short. E5. We go into a Gioco piano. So now we have white castling, knight f6, d3, black castles, a4, d6, c3. It's fairly standard stuff in Chess-Based Live Book. This has all been seen before. There's been 52 games of h3 here, h6, and it carries on. Bishop a7, all been seen before. Knight e7, shifting that knight to g6 is very, very popular and logical. If you think about it, this h3 means that if later a knight on f4, it's difficult to kick. So this looks like a nice attacking maneuver. Bishop b3, which is in advance of any d5, just in case, and also maybe the bishop can later come to this other diagonal. Knight g6, d4, rook e8, and in fact bishop c2 here is played. So strengthening the e4 pawn. Bishop d7, a5. Now this is getting slightly interesting at this point for me. From a positional perspective, white is marking that b6 square. And in fact, this next move by Wesley So, c6, seems as though it sort of helps the idea of a5 to fix that dark square. And you might not think this is at all significant, but you know, possibly is if you did a really objective, like scientific analysis of this game. It seems here that this weakening might be a bit dodgy. There actually is a very, very technical move available here for black in form of knight h5. This plan I mentioned that you can entrench a knight on f4, as Ben Feingold says, knife f5 or knife f4. It's such a dangerous creature when it's on f4. And you might not think this is possible here. It turns out it is. Well, at least in terms of if you try and exploit the loose piece, this is destruction for white. After rook takes e5, queen h4. This is actually completely lost for white, it seems. I mean, there's a very, very big advantage for black in the variations. I'll give you an idea, and this is fascinating. I mean, maybe this is common knowledge or something. It looks like sometimes you get this sort of attacking out of Benoni type positions, but here, yeah, it's not quite Benoni. You've got this very dangerous bishop on f2. This position here, bang, bishop takes h3, and it's just falling to pieces for white. You can actually get mated quite quickly. This is, well, after king f3 in particular, it's now a checkmate in one with queen h3. Checkmate. Yeah, it's just really, really dangerous. This position here is mega dangerous. If rook e3 giving back the exchange, this is a bit wimpy. Again, bishop takes h3, and it's just better for black. You might think, well, couldn't we take the bishop there? Not really. You can see the knights, the two knights and the queen are deadly. Pardon me. The two knights and the queen. Let's have a quick look. Check this out. It's absolutely the rook's going to swing across pretty soon, and white's pieces are just not doing anything. It's just slaughter time. So threatening mate, for example, knight h2. It's absolutely deadly stuff. It's interesting, this moment where knight h5, and yeah, I mentioned this because this c6, by contrast, is potentially pacifying black, slightly weakening the dark squares. It seems in some way that, I don't know, maybe black in the future might be playing for d5. But let's have a look at the game. D takes e5 tends to fix down more in the style of a5, black's dark square weaknesses here. D takes, now knight c4, hitting dark square weaknesses and targets. And it's a little bit passive for black. With e4 secure here, we have queen e7. And now white doesn't even mind exchanging off queens. He's got a kind of advantage of the more fixed, these pawns on light squares and the adjacent dark squares. He's got an advantage here, which is torturous. After rook e6, this is a poisoned pawn, funny enough. If we take just rook b8, the knight's trapped. But doesn't matter, rook d1. And now rook b8 is potentially a serious threat. King f1. Now the knight drops back, and you see, look at this pressure on the dark squares. And in fact, white maximizes the dark square pressure here with b3 now. With this bishop, is going to go onto this diagonal, torturing even more dark squares everywhere, basically. Bishop e6. And it's here, white grabs essentially a positional advantage. Knight b6 stuffs that bishop, basically. Now, if this is ignored, black actually took that off. Actually, let's investigate if this is ignored. If black, say tries to challenge it, bishop a3 is painful. You can see black's actually losing material now on dark squares, losing the exchange. If he plays c5, that's just horrendous. Knight d5, this is just getting horrendous. The bishop's kind of bad. White can do all sorts of things. Rook d6 is interesting. Let's just follow this through, for example. We'll put the rook back with the bishop blocked in. I believe white has a big positional advantage here. Let's see. Yeah, a move like rook d1 or knight d6. Technically, it seems anyway, white's in very, very good shape. Let's just go back. If this is ignored, with knight d7, I think white's in very, very good shape. Probably, maybe simpler is just to support it, actually. And what does black do? If he ever takes this, giving up the dark square bishop, c4. Yeah, this is just very pleasant for white. So anyway, it's taken immediately, and you might not think this is a big deal, but these advantages can potentially accumulate to vast proportions. So white has the bishop pair here, and yeah, let's see now how the game evolves, with white having this dark square bishop with no counterpart in black's position. Rook d7, bishop e3, rook c8, c4, black takes and stops c5. He was concerned perhaps about white playing c5. He wants to try and attack this pawn maybe later. Knight e1, and there's going to be more pressure now on these two targets on dark squares. Knight d3. Black supports at least e5, but he's unable he's not in the position to really win this without losing this. Knight e7, king e2, the king centralizes, and black tries to play actively now with f5, actually threatening f4, winning the bishop. White counters actively with f4, and this kind of also exposes potentially a little bit black's king. You see black's king is on potentially dangerous f file here, and in fact here black's giving up the other bishop now. Yeah, this bishop is awkwardly placed. If f takes e4, I think it's going to be big trouble. Anyway, well, white's still winning the bishop pair there, and it's big trouble. But this is very awkward, this position. How do we actually untangle this? If we go here, let's see. If we go here, knight d5. Yeah, this just looks as though white's doing very nicely there. Okay, so g5. So white's getting now the 2 bishops. This is just a game about accumulation of advantages so far. Okay, so you might think, okay, the 2 bishops, what can they really do here? It seems black, you might argue, well, black's got a hook on d4. He uses that, and white doesn't swap off that knight. And it looks as though this pawn's also a bit weak, so you might think, well, really? But check. And in fact, the story here is that white simply counterattacks black's pawn. He doesn't need to try and defend it. Well, he can't anyway. He just counterattacks the pawn here. And what's even worse is there's a certain awkwardness about this position as well. Black actually took this pawn. There's 2 pawns hanging here. This is a very creative, dynamic play. Maybe very well calculated from MVL, one would expect. Black actually took this pawn. If he takes the b6 pawn, it seems white gets an advantage like this, with king d3 here, and taking on d4, he'll be a pawn up, and the bishop can return back here, and it's a very, very pleasant position. So yeah, black grabs this pawn here, and is ready to win this one, except there's a greater penalty introduced. It's not just getting a pawn back, it's actually bishop h2. And in fact, Wesley So thought his position is lost here. He actually resigned here. Yeah, he resigned a pawn up. You might think, what on earth is this? Resigning a pawn up. The bishop pair is actually quite vicious here, and if you look at the king position, you know, we can't move the king without any discovered check, losing the rook there. So the king's kind of stranded there at the moment. Yeah, if we take the pawn, bishop takes b7 actually wins the exchange, which is actually pretty winning here. There's 2 main things black can try and do. Just passively kind of lose the exchange, and that pawn, this position, just purely the exchange down for no pawn. Or he can try and get another pawn with knight a4 check, knight b2 check, and the king can centralize. So he's losing the exchange, but then king d5 wins the pawn back. Eventually, or wins material back, and this is just winning for white. Or knight a3, king takes c5. It's just the exchange down for one pawn. Sorry, for one pawn here, but this is just winning for white. So yeah, black actually resigned a pawn up here. You might think that's a little bit unusual, but it's the power of the bishop pair. So this game is basically, it seems like a gradual accumulation of advantage from that move a5. It seems white got a grip on the dark squares, won the dark square bishop, and was able to win the light square bishop later, and we have the menacing power of 2 complementary bishops. Remember, a bishop's blind always on one set of squares, but if you've got the 2 bishops, it's considered much healthier state of affairs in general. They look out for each other's back, the bishop pair, as they do here. To actually win material, though, they're actually complementing to actually win that rook in this final position. Let's have a look actually at knights. While we're here, let's have a look at knight c6. Yeah, white still wins the exchange with bishop c7. Yeah, bishop c7 is, yeah, awkward. We can't step in front of a discovered check. And here, bishop takes c6, and it doesn't really matter how black takes. Rook e6, we're going to be winning that h6 pawn, or one of these pawns on the king side. So yeah, the power of the bishop pair in this final position. Yeah, an interesting clash, at a very high level clash. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks so much.